There's always going to be a war.
That's the way it is today. I mean, I'm not sure why the wars come as they come, but they do.
There's always going to be soldiers that are getting sent over there and that are coming back not right.
There are effects of war.
A lot of veterans are out there right now in the streets, and they're homeless. Veterans out there that are lonely, empty inside, they still struggle.
Returning home from Vietnam, I realized that the Vietnam War had not really ended. It was just the beginning of another war, the post-war. Just the coming home process, which was very traumatic, in addition to the type of fighting in Vietnam.
In Vietnam, I saw and did the most violent, cruel things. And you come home and then you're told, stop. No more.
They taught me how to survive and keep alive when I was overseas, but they didn't ever teach me what to do when I came back. I would really like to just start my new life.
One of the main reasons, one of the main traumas of vets in the coming home process, that whole quiet, that cold chill of not anyone asking, you know, being afraid to or not wanting to for whatever reason.
They need a foundation because they don't have anywhere else to turn.
I need you to just stay with me. I hear you. I know you're upset. I know you don't want to be redeployed. I just need some time to work with you.
For over a quarter of a century, the National Veterans Foundation has been dedicated to helping America's veterans adjust to the challenges of life after military service. Our veteran assistance programs and experienced staff have helped over 300,000 veterans who have nowhere else to turn. But the need for these programs has never been greater. There are more than 23 million veterans living in America today. Nearly 2 million men and women have served our country in Iraq and Afghanistan. Hundreds of thousands have been wounded, and thousands more return home every month.
We try to get them to the services throughout the nation where they need to get help, whether it's with PTSD, traumatic brain injury diagnosis, employment, or education.
First you see the flash, and then you hear the sound, and then you feel it in your chest. And it hit the truck in front of me, and the guy in front of me didn't even get hurt. And at first it was like, I couldn't believe that just happened. I couldn't believe that just happened. And then when you drive past it, you're like, wow, that could have hit me, I could have died. And that's when the fear kind of kicked in.
Many of our returning heroes have left their homes, families, and jobs to serve multiple tours in these conflicts. They have spent months on the ground in a combat environment facing unimaginable stress.
And you don't know who's who. You see a guy with an AK-47 and you think, okay, he's hostile, or he's a farmer trying to protect his crops or his family or what have you.
I mean, there's no winners in war, and when you survive it, many, as we know, about 40%, come back with what we call PTSD symptoms, and usually half of those develop and are locked in what we call acute PTSD.
Shad Meshad is the person who is probably more responsible than anybody else for the creation of the Vietnam Veteran Centers around the country. He's a very, very important American. He has earned his degree his master's degree in psychiatric social work from Florida State University, and he's received all kinds of awards. He's been on 60 Minutes, he's been on 2020, he's been on all the networks. He is probably among the 4 or 5 best known veterans of the Vietnam War. Now, we'd have him here for all those reasons, but we also have him here because he has one heck of a story to tell about his life, and I know you're going to welcome him warmly. Shad Meshad.
Well, I'm Shad Meshad. I'm the president and founder of the National Veterans Foundation. The foundation was set up at the end of November of 1985 on paper. It became known as the Vietnam Veterans Aid Foundation. And that whole story is pretty interesting because this was not something I dreamed up to do. It was something I was coaxed to do. I actually got commissioned in '66 as a second lieutenant in the infantry. And I also went from a second lieutenant in infantry to a captain in one transfer, skipped my first lieutenant's bars, went right into being a captain because I was a mental health professional. And I ended up going and doing my last year in Vietnam. And I came back and within about 5 months ended out here in LA. And by that time I had literally ziplocked or bagged 360 plus 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. I went to a cocktail party my first night here at USC and met Dr. Phil May, who was the head of MPI at UCLA, which is the largest psychiatric center in the world. He talked to me as if I was his peer. In fact, he talked to me as if he could learn something from me. He begged me to come work for him and just assess the hospital. And he knew the VA at the time was not assessing Vietnam and didn't know how to deal with them. They weren't coming. And here he's got this U.S. Army captain that's just out of Vietnam who can talk their language. And I called Bob, and we had a place to stay where he was staying over by USC. And we drove down, and the next day I was on the job. Before you know it, I'm sitting there talking to him. The one guy, David Carver, had been in LA for a year, and David was telling me about all the areas of Venice because I hadn't really not known LA, and I didn't know Venice Beach from Malibu or whatever. We went down to a famous pier that no longer exists called the POP Pier, Pacific Ocean Park Pier. It was a big amusement park pier, and David says, "Let me go show you where everybody is." And we go through this trap door, and we enter into the pier, and it's literally a city of 350 homeless people. Most all of them are vets. And that's where my career started. That door opened, and I never looked back.
It's a psychological illness that some say plagues more than 1 million veterans of the Vietnam War. Tonight, Dan Rather continues the story.
Treatment began here in the hills of Malibu, California. His name is Shad Meshad.
Bravo was his Marine Vietnam vet that had located up in the Coral Canyon area and recreated Vietnam. I was allowed to go in and work, and I was always under armed guard, and then I could only go up there on my motorcycle. I had to park, I had to be frisked, and I went in just like I was going into a military compound. I did that for 5 years.
I came down here, one guy was just bashing his head and his hands. He was all bloodied, and he was just trying to kill himself, and he wanted to do it manly. He wasn't going to cut his wrists or whatever. He just wanted to go out violently.
That's where I really learned how far away from society veterans were willing to go. But I kept getting guys in that were injured and getting them down, and then they would go back, and then eventually a lot of them reintegrated back into society. And that's really where I got my skills.
Gave me a diagnosis for PTSD.
Post-traumatic stress disorders.
Please welcome Shad Meshad.
Hi, Shad. Welcome to People Are Talking. Ross mentioned post-traumatic stress disorder. Shad, explain exactly what you mean by that.
Well, post-traumatic stress disorders, it's sort of an evolving clinical term for what used to be called post-Vietnam syndrome or delayed stress reactions, which is become very popular.
We knew that there was a condition going on that wasn't schizophrenia, wasn't character disorders. A young psychologist who had came back from Vietnam, a Marine, Charles Figley, did his research in what he called stress reactions from trauma. And in '74, he met me, saw me in a CBS piece. So we sort of hooked up, and in '75, we went to the APA. We presented this concept of delayed stress. He came out with a book in '78 called Delayed Stress Amongst Vietnam Veterans. All of a sudden, the APA, the American Psychiatric and the American Psychological started really looking at it. Basically, it's the experience of a catastrophic, life-threatening experience.
And you survive it. And what you do, the mind as a protective device stores this or puts it away.
You become almost freeze-dried, locked into yourself. You put it in a vault so you can move on. As that kind of melts away, and all of a sudden you start having feelings, irritability, flashbacks, intrusive thoughts, anger develops out of it, and rage. A smell could go by. Any of your five senses will recreate the event that you experienced maybe a few years ago.
This monster is lurking in this closet, and when it opens up, it jumps you.
It's the normal reaction to an abnormal situation. It's not being crazy, it's a disorder, and people now can get help and get treatment.
Albert Perdek served in World War II on the USS Bunker Hill along 2,000 other American sailors. On May 11, 1945, a kamikaze attack turned the flight deck of the aircraft carrier into an inferno. Pilots in the ready room died in their seats. Planes caught fire, machine guns fired inadvertently, and over 350 sailors lost their lives. 65 years later, Albert Perdek still struggles with the trauma caused by the attack.
The kid next to me kept repeating the same few words. We must have been hit. We must have been hit. I said, shut the hell up and put on your helmet. I slapped him. I had to shut him up. It's a terrible regret. It's not right. But I did. It's done. It's black like my uniform all around me. It's black. And in order to get up out of the hatch, I have to step. And when I stepped on somebody's privates and his stomach. And I looked down at him. I couldn't see him. I said, crying out loud, get up, come on, let's get an oxygen mask. What the hell are you sleeping? Death doesn't occur. That's not in my thought. 1973, the guys convinced me that that guy was dead. Took me till 1973 to accept that he was dead. But I stepped on him. You don't do that.
Today's veterans, like Specialist Robin Tate, are now adjusting to a radically different life as civilians, with a weak economy and government support services that are severely lacking.
Start pushing these soldiers too much to the point where, you know, they feel hopeless, that they might hurt themselves, or they might, you know, hurt other people.
I carried around a .380 pistol all the time, just because I was paranoid and I was crazy. My name's Chad Reiber, Airborne Ranger. In Najaf, I got hit by an RPG, so I went home to Santa Barbara. I drank a liter, and I went to this party in Isla Vista, and this guy bumped into me, so I pulled it out, I loaded it, and I pulled the trigger at his head, and the weapon didn't go off. Got charged with assault with a deadly weapon and like 5 other felonies, and I was facing 5 years. Right before that, though, I met Shad. He interviewed me, you know, gave me a diagnosis for PTSD, and I started working with him a little bit. And on that day of court, he came to court and testified on my behalf. And I mean, pretty much saved me from doing 5 years in prison. To actually help people and do positive things for not just yourself, but for everybody else, 5 days a week. And I mean, that makes me feel good inside.
Shad has invested his life in helping veterans. Shad has been through a whole lot, and I'm gaining a lot of experience from working with him. And he's given me a lot of insight, being able to help another life. It was rewarding. He's always asking me, well, where you at in your head? He's always concerned. So he's a good boss, but at the same time, he's a good person away from the job. Shad has life in him, and I see that. And he inspires me. You know, he inspires me, encourages me to keep on moving.
At the National Veterans Foundation, we understand the problems facing America's veterans because we are America's veterans.
The National Veterans Foundation is great. I wish that when I got out of the military, I knew of a place that offered the kind of assistance that this place offers.
Well, what I'll do is I'll give you the number, and then you would just ask for any available service officer.
Through the National Veterans Foundation's Lifeline for Vets, our toll-free crisis and information hotline, Our experienced counselors help veterans and their family members get the help they need when they have nowhere else to turn.
What year did you get out of the service?
Somebody tells you, hey man, I hate Iraq, I hate everything that goes on over there, I want to kill myself because of it now. Or, you know, I have nothing going for me because of it now. Hold on, man, wait a minute, I know what you're talking about, man. I've deployed 4 times myself. It's like, man, there is a way up. You don't have to let that stuff burden you down. Let's lighten the load and let's carry on, man. It's like, drink water, drive on.
Having fielded over 250,000 calls, our operators, all trained veterans, listen, support, and inform veteran callers, guiding them through the VA claims process, directing them to crisis intervention specialists or to other services appropriate to each caller's needs.
The National Veterans Foundation, the Lifeline for Vets, is the lifeline for veterans in this country. The foundation provides for veterans or families and significant others a toll-free number, a website where they can go and get almost 90% of everything they need to know answered, either in a phone call or being on the website.
You know, we didn't ask for war to go on for 10 years or 9 years. You know, we didn't ask to be sent on multiple deployments 5, 6 times. You know, and we certainly didn't ask, you know, a lot of veterans, whether they're amputees, whether they have PTSD, whatever, they didn't ask for that. No, they signed up for it. They signed up to do their job. They did their job. Now, why can't I be processed into the VA as I'm being processed out of the military? You know, hand me my VA card on the way out. That way they know who should be coming.
And another thing what we have to deal with in Afghanistan and Iraq is we don't fight soldiers with uniforms. Everybody is pretty much a possible enemy. You really don't know who's who. You can shake the guy's hand and give him some medicine, and then the next day he's planting a bomb in the road. When you tell him that you're coming back to give him some medicine, he try to blow you up. We have a tight-knit camaraderie that we like to talk about stuff, and I know that to me that is the magic pill for PTSD, is talking. I think the more you talk about it, the more you de-traumatize it, desensitize it a little bit, I think that will pick up everything else. But I do know that you need to talk to somebody else that experienced the same stuff that you experienced. It doesn't just help talking to your mom about it, because it's not really doing a lot of good. I think you need to talk to people that have been in that situation. Like, you don't want to talk to somebody about a car crash that's never been in one. Let's talk with somebody that's been in a bad car accident that's flipped a vehicle. It doesn't make sense to talk to somebody that really hasn't seen it or done it.
Oh, no kid, I was in the Army. Yeah, I was 82nd.
One of the reasons that we have vets answering this phone is because they do understand. Most of them have been there, done that. They don't automatically discount you because you have an addiction. They don't see the addiction, they see the trauma behind the addiction. And if you don't manage the addiction and the trauma together, then you exacerbate both.
I like helping people, I like changing lives. If I can have an impact, if I can say a word of encouragement, a word of hope, anything that can inspire and encourage to someone, that can get them to see how the situation is and see that it can be changed and see that there is something that they can do about it, then I felt as if I did something.
This is one of the spots that we hit quite frequently. This is 6 and Gladys. This is considered Skid Row.
This is where we try to do some good. Just making a difference. You know, if we can get someone into a program and let them know that life can start over, that there are places they can go, just that knowledge, it plants a seed.
You can believe he flew jets in Vietnam for 2 tours. And now, I'd like to get
Hank Hahn, who was an Annapolis graduate, flew fighter planes 2 years in Vietnam, kept pushing me. In '84, we started putting together, you know, the charter, the bylaws. We put our dream sheet together, and initially that's what we were. You know, we were going to be the United Way for Vietnam veterans. We were going to raise $150 million a year. You build it, and they will come. Whoever they were, I didn't know. As we did eventually get, you know, our state charter and then our federal charter by the end of '85. On paper, we were a paper organization, and we had a couple of events. One was with the screening of First Blood, Rambo and First Blood. We raised our first $10,000. You know, we were operating out of my house. One of my bedrooms was turned into an office. We had like 4 or 5 combat Vietnam vet board of directors.
Let's get introduce some special friends. Alan Gibson. Let's hear it for Alan. Board member, BDAF. Dan Fogg, number 97. All right. Frank, the Killer Walker, number 100.
Bernie Goodby, our main advisory board member.
Most of them, they were all characters. I mean, we were all characters. But we really didn't know what we were facing. Historically, we were on paper as the Vietnam Veterans Aid Foundation with this grandiose idea. And interesting enough, what happened was, as an author on the Vietnam War, my book was read by Kate Knudsen. And she happened to be married to Keith Knudsen, who was one of the drummers for the Doobie Brothers, who had split up 4 years earlier. Bad blood, very few were talking to each other. And the next thing you know, I get a phone call, and he comes to my office and says, I'd like to introduce myself to you. He sits down and he says, I want to tell you who I am first. He said, before I was a Doobie Brother, I was a draft dodger. I burned my draft card.
You know, it's such a nice pairing all these years later. You who protested the war and didn't want to go because you didn't believe in the cause, joining up with someone who was in the war, in the combat zone, and working together and helping everybody who was there.
You still want to talk to me? You know, I burned my draft card. I said, I don't have any feelings. But I said, you're pretty lucky. I said, you're lucky, and you're lucky you didn't have to serve in Vietnam.
Yeah, I think it's important that the issues of the war really have nothing to do with it. It's the warriors, the men and the women now, that went over there and fought for us. And I think that's the focus right now.
He asked me what I was up to, and I said, well, you know, got this nonprofit foundation on paper. I talked about what I wanted to do and what it was about and what my dreams were about it. And he said, got an idea. How many more copies of that book you got? He sent them out with a letter to all the ex-members of the band. Keith was the only member of the band that could talk to any clique. A couple of things happened. One was Keith had not heard back from all the band members, but he heard back from about half of them. Keith had a band, a country rock band called Southern Pacific, and he had John McPhee in it. And he decided that at least that group and any of the other talent in the area, they would do this Homeless Heroes Feast. We only allowed the homeless to go into this concert, and they would play continuously from like 12 noon till about 5 o'clock. For 5 hours this group played, and it was probably the greatest concert, and I've been to some great ones, that was ever put together. I never forget that day, and they played till their hands were raw, blisters on them, their voices were hoarse. To listen to Bobby Caldwell and Michael McDonald harmonizing, and Skunk Baxter, John McPhee, Keith Knudsen, pieces of just bands that were doing other things just came and they jammed for 5 hours.
I want to introduce the man responsible for this whole concept of taking entertainment and raising money for the plight of those Vietnam veterans that are hurting today, 15, 20 years later, for all of you out there. That man is Keith Knudsen, the drummer.
Word got out, we were in the newspaper. Before you know it, the other band guys heard about it. Everybody flew in. This is January of '87. And I met them all in the one of the library rooms on the first floor of Patriotic Hall where we'd had that concert. And Keith went and embraced every one of them, and Keith opened up the meeting and talked about it.
I tell you, if you don't know, I want to let you know why we're all here. I called all the doobies up to ask them to get back together to do this concert for Vietnam veterans.
I got up there and I said, first of all, when I arrived in LA, and I had an 8-track player and an old Volkswagen, and all I played was doobies. I said, so your music vibrates through my body. Keith looked at everybody and said, well, we need to know today, so I'm going to start off. And he threw his hand up and he says, I'm in. And I remember John McPhee's hand, Michael McDonald's hand went up, Chet McCracken, and then the hands just started popping up around the room. Everybody had their hand up. And the next thing we know, there's this press conference on March the 12th or 15th. Tickets were going to go on sale at the Hollywood Bowl.
I called all the Doobie Brothers back up, asked them if they would like to get together to do a benefit for Shad's Vietnam Veteran Aid Foundation, and they all agreed to do that. And we did do it at the Hollywood Bowl in May of 1987.
Let's rock.
How you doing, Chad?
Tell you, this is something else. I'm numb. Can't believe this is going on. But it's happening because this is a major benefit, the major benefit for the Vietnam Veterans Aid Foundation. We had like 3,000 disabled vets that we got sponsors to buy tickets for, so we had the VIP seating for all Vietnam vets. I had a Vietnam vet open the show. My first patient, he had a great voice, David Carver, opened the show.
People have asked me if I'm nervous to be here tonight. And I said after Vietnam, who can be nervous being here tonight?
Our theme song was Taking It to the Streets, because I've been a street counselor, and so I love that. So we started taking it to the streets. Doobie Brothers benefit for Vietnam Veterans Aid. And it just rolled across that belly of that thing. I just looked up and said, you know, this is going to happen.
Many people are down there because they lost their home, they lost their job, they got fired, and they've given up. But then you have those that still have hope and still believe that they can make it, and there is something out there for them. All they need is a chance. All they need is a hand and some information, and we're willing to do that. That is one of our primary goals and objective, is to distribute information.
I think what the public really needs to know is that there is an organization out here that is working to steer veterans to the benefits that they need, and not just benefits, but information. There's a whole network of services that are available to them that if you are coming back and you've just been through a war experience, the last thing you're going to be able to access is how a complicated social system works. So you need people who've got a map. The NVF has a map, and they have guides that are on the phone, you know, 24/7, almost. But that's what our goal is. They have guides that are in place that can tell somebody, if you have a legal issue, where do you live? Charleston. Here's a phone number. Here's a website. Go to our website and click on this. And you see that drop down? Check the third thing. That's where you'll find some answers. It's concrete help in real time.
Well, the one thing that the NVF has always done, and Shad has always done, is give veterans as many ways to be helped as we can possibly think of. Now, this has always been the case from the vet centers. And you know what? We don't want to tell you how to be treated. You tell us what you need and we'll help you along the way. So part of that is the internet. You know, part of the treatment or part of the connection is with social networking, with websites, with live chats, with cell phones, with, you know, so we incorporated all of this stuff into our website to where a veteran can go, or even active duty. We get calls from active duty also. So we've created a service website where veterans and active duty and family members can go and get all the basic information that they need to know. Okay, here's the name of the form that I need to fill out, and I can download it from our website. You can apply, you know, you can fill the paperwork out and print it out. And if you ever need any help, our phone number is always at the top of the screen.
With this younger generation of veterans, you know, be more accustomed with technology, it's a lot easier to actually speak to someone online, I guess, for the fact that, one, some veterans are more, in a sense, more open if they actually speak online, or, you know, talk to us online rather than having a voice on the phone. Everything's confidential. We don't have to hear their voice, they don't have to hear ours, and I think they're more accustomed to that. They're more lenient to having technology and actually talking to us about that.
The bottom line is multiple tours, over half of them are Reserve National Guard. They're getting pulled in and out of their regular civilian life. They become more soldiers than they have been civilians. And the second worst financial disaster in our country occurred just a couple of years ago, and they're coming into it. And it's already tough enough for these, many of them high school graduates, most of them, coming back, trying to go to school, trying to work part-time, work full-time, and do a multiplicity of things, and they can't get a job.
The Soviet Union's war in Afghanistan is often referred to as Russia's Vietnam. They asked some of our veterans to come to Moscow. Bob Brown went along.
88, 89, I went to Russia representing the National Veterans Foundation, sharing my work.
All right, Bill, is this the beginning of world peace or what, huh?
They all embraced me, and I don't know the Russian word, but they said that we now know that we are all one spirit. That was a pretty powerful thing. I never felt, even when I didn't speak the language of communication, Barry, when I was in my element, when it was doing what I do. The interesting thing that happened during the first 10 years is we discovered something very big, and it's what sort of is our headliner for who we are, and that was the toll-free number. You know, I always wanted a place where everybody could reach it. You couldn't say, well, I can't put 35 cents in the phone or whatever, or a homeless person on the street could pick up a payphone. It was the toll-free, was saving lives, getting people where they needed to be.
It's a wonderful model that takes into account a holistic approach to serving these guys. It's not just trying to fit someone into a model that may not fully meet their needs.
I had a guy in Iowa, and he was stranded, and he was at the Greyhound bus station. Hi, my name is Mike Washington, served in Panama, 76 to 79. I was in the Army, infantryman. I was able to actually call the Greyhound bus station, get a ticket donated for him. It was in another city, but I had somebody pick him up there and take him over to the other bus station, and he was able to catch the bus down to San Francisco to Menlo Park. That was one of my claims to fame there. A lot of veterans are out there right now in the streets, and they're homeless. Veterans out there that are lonely, empty inside, they still struggle. This is a war going on inside of each and every one of us.
And it's a real thing. A lot of people see a guy comes back, oh, he's a combat vet. I hear all this stuff about PTSD, that he's probably dangerous, and so I'm not going to hire him. And that's the biggest issue facing these guys. They come home and they can't get a job, and it just ruins what self-esteem they've got.
Sometimes it can get a little depressing meeting with the veterans and finding out that they're getting treated less than the normal people, the normal citizens. And me hearing that, I get upset. Hearing that they're getting told that they don't qualify because of their military experience, whereas someone with a high school diploma and no experience whatsoever gets the job, which I think is absurd.
Our employment center was specifically designed so that employers can go on and fill out the job description of the position that they're looking to fill, and a veteran can go in, see a name and a number, and call directly. We want veterans to get in contact directly with services that they need.
A combat vet comes home, he has a lot of stress he's got to deal with, which then he's got to do his job hunting, and he has no skills. He really doesn't. He may have some excellent leadership skills, an ability to learn on his feet, but he has no skills that will get him in the door. And that is the biggest problem that they face. I mean, PTSD, injuries, so on, these are all important things, but people measure themselves by their work. I don't know whether that's a good thing or not. They do. They measure themselves, well, I got a job, or I don't have a job. I'm a good person, I'm a bad person. And these guys come back doubting themselves from some of the things they've done over there, or some of the things they've seen happen over there. And then they get, with this economy that's going on right now, and the difficulty that a guy, 22-year-old, that has no real marketable skills getting a job, it's terrible. That's I would say right now half the calls we get have a basis in the fact that they're unemployed. They have financial problems. Well, that means they're underemployed or unemployed. That's where I see despair in the messages, the people, the emails I get, the text messages I get, the phone calls I get. That's where I see more despair than anything else.
One of the most important things you can give to any of the struggling veteran is hope, contact. The phone line in a way is actually as close to being intimate with someone you don't know as you can be.
How are you?
To be able to sit and talk and have that caring voice, which really sounds very elementary, but people need to talk. People need to talk. You're with the Marines, right? Welcome. First of all, let me just tell you, welcome home. I used to spend the night on the streets, and the reason I did it for so many years is I wanted really to be as close to absorb what's going on inside of their head if they call our number from that position. So one night on the streets, I'm aching for 2 or 3 days. It's just not what you think it is. I go into every call thinking that, because I don't know, but I don't want to be not ready to receive with feeling the worst scenario, and that's what we do. And if that's what we do, we want to be the best at doing that.
We're always trying to get our PTSAs out to the major markets within the U.S. If we're more visible, that means we'll get more calls, that means there'll be more people that we help out, which will bring in more donations.
I'm Dan Lauria. I was proud to serve my country during Vietnam, and now I'm proud to serve the National Veterans Foundation.
Hello, I'm Oliver Stone. The trauma of war does not end on the battlefield.
The Vietnam Veterans Aid Foundation is helping vets. The guys behind the VVAF are veterans who understand surviving peace.
Where everybody knows who we are, knows what we're doing. There's public service announcements running, there's TV programs running. It's critical work to make sure we're getting the word out.
I urge you to support the National Veterans Foundation. Thank you.
You know, the fundraising part is a difficult part. We put on the best celebrity golf tournaments and comedy shows, I think, ever.
I'm just here to support them any way I can.
And to rival any. I mean, our first show, we had Robin Williams and the Arnolds, to Jim Carrey, to everybody in living color. And that's the most powerful thing.
Radio, I said, there's a tank shooting at us. And the guy back in the rear says, is it friendly? No, it's shooting at us.
Please welcome Shad Mishad.
I appreciate hearing everyone speak, both sides, left and right. I hope we're all in this together.
Would you please welcome Shad Mishad?
Shad Mishad is a Vietnam vet, an authority on post-traumatic stress disorder, and president of the National Veterans Foundation. He joins us.
We need to outreach more. We need more outreach-type projects.
Introduce right now our special guests for this evening's show, Shad Mishad.
I think soldiers, they're the most unbelievable human beings because of what they have to experience. Most of society doesn't experience what soldiers do.
When you look at a soldier, he's the real deal. He gives up more than any person in our society. So if you want to think of who are the kings of society in a way, I used to call them the philosopher kings. If you want to know about real philosophy about life, they're really philosopher kings. They cut through all the smoke and mirrors and they'll tell you what it's really about. They give the ultimate, they give their souls and their bodies up, never guarantee that you're going to come back. Know that they represent everything your country's about. Every time you're able to go to a store, walk out of your house, or there is some type of security out there, and these soldiers today volunteer. They're just volunteers. It's not a draft or whatever. They give the ultimate. They go in there for the right reasons, regardless of what the politics are, whatever. In their mind, they're doing it for you and for you and for you.
And that's what the NVF is all about, is saving the lives of people who have put their lives in danger for us. And that's why I am one of their most dedicated fans. We work hard. It's not Most of the times it's not a glorious position, but that's not the point. The point is that we are here to serve those who have served. And anything that we can do to help them have a better life is where we want to go. And it's as simple as that and as profound as that. And it's a mission for all of us. All of us are very dedicated to the mission. It's not about us, it's about what we do. And I think that's important.
The power of what we do drives you to do things and drives you to do whatever within reason you can do to constantly try to supply veterans and their families and kids with things that they need.
Saving Private Ryan was the most watched movie this weekend.
We got some money from DreamWorks when Saving Private Ryan came out because of the impact.
It looked familiar. I was there. It brought back memories, I tell you.
That 20 minutes, the opening of the film, is forever. And I have spoken with and worked with World War II vets that talk and have talked forever about minutes.
For about 6 months, so even the first year from the time the film opened, the first year, our calls went from like maybe 100 calls from World War II vets to 100 calls a week. We're talking about their readjustment problems, that they had suppressed many problems and had a lot of problems that they didn't realize that they were eligible for services for. So one of the stories was a call that I received about 7 years ago, Christmas week, and I happened to be in the office late one night and have a knee-jerk reaction. The phone rang and I picked it up, and it was a World War II vet from the East Coast who said that his wife had Alzheimer's and that he was now legally blind, and he had never asked for anything. He fought at the Battle of the Bulge, and he wanted to know if there was anything we could do. He needed to feed his wife. He said, my wife most of the time doesn't know who I am. She's kind to me or whatever, and that's painful enough. And it's, you know, I'm legally blind. I can navigate the house, but can't drive. I can't go get food. And I sat and must have talked to him for an hour. It sort of made my Christmas to sit and tell him that don't worry, help is coming.
KGO Radio News Time 6:04. Good evening. This week, the KGO Spotlight is being dedicated to our troops, to those returning from Iraq and Afghanistan. Some of them physically wounded, others emotionally scarred by combat.
Joining us by phone, it's a pleasure to welcome Shad Meshad. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Shad.
Thank you.
Hey, Shad, can you shed some light on this question of what makes this a different conflict?
I still think that the coming home, even though there's been tremendous changes over the last 35 years, and particularly the last 25 years, it's still one of those things where it's very difficult, particularly for combat soldiers, men or women, to reach out for help. It's really a journey in a very different setting, quite different than Vietnam. It's almost it's even a little different than Afghanistan. But we're learning. We're learning as we go along. But unfortunately, the cost is tremendous. The type injuries, the brain injuries, are quite different. Losing a leg and losing, parts of your brain and your vision and things like that. It's pretty horrific. We're already seeing that. We know that. It's just what we're going to do about it.
Continuing to do workshops in that as I do and as I will be doing for several years with the individuals that are still living with the aftermath of such a horrific event. We're here today really to just talk about this current war and yourselves. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff. Sean, tell us about the young man that decides to go to the Marine Corps. Where are we going back to?
September 11th happened, and when those towers fell, all of our security was now in question. And how that fear manifested itself with me was rage.
And I know it's hard to let go of that rage. It's very controlling. And every one of us have felt it in one way or another.
My best friend was killed right in front of me. I mean, I was still so pissed off about that. I can't get that out of my head.
I mean, the rage is still there.
It was driving me crazy. My first 3.5 years back, it was killing me physically. And I was a therapist on the streets here in LA. It was comforting. Oh, I can.
I don't want to let go of the rage.
I know.
To be honest with you, I don't want to let go of it because it makes me feel warm and it makes me feel like I got a purpose.
Behind those eyes have seen a lot.
He turns on the news and he says 3 more U.S. personnel were killed in Iraq today.
They'll talk about it, but they don't show what's real. Why can't we see if the little 3-year-old Iraqi girl got her head blown off because troops happened to open fire mistakenly on a checkpoint? That's something that happens in war, and you should see the results of it.
Guys were burning. I started smelling burning flesh, and you know, this is real.
And I don't dispute what I did in Iraq. I killed people in Iraq. I'm not going to dispute that. If you go to war, your people die when you go to war. I mean, that's just the job.
You should see the bodies coming home in the flag-draped coffins. You should see the wounded people in this war. They might be showing it around the clock, but they're showing the Clorox bleached version of it.
For the media to turn around and portray that as something other than what it is, and what it is an extraordinary sacrifice.
All those guys are going to be out eventually, and then what? They're not troops anymore, they're not soldiers anymore, so who's supporting them? Nobody is. All that stuff disappears as soon as you get out.
I would say like it's what I perceive to be a complete and total disconnect between those of us who have served in a combat zone versus everyone else, basically.
I'm up to 38 people that I know, we're friends with that have since passed away.
It's as real as life can be. I mean, I really do believe that. I mean, death is about, being around all that death and that destruction, responsible for it even, is about as real as life can be. And that's the thing I struggle with.
His job is to make sure he comes home alive and tells the story. His job is to come home and take care of his family.
In Najaf, I got hit by shrapnel. I had a stroke from the concussion, and I came back home.
The thing that I'm here forever for you guys is the fact that emotionally we got to cross over. And first thing that I will do and spend the rest of my professional life is to get rid of the rage out of you. Well, somehow you've got to make peace inside. What I see is you're still fighting the world in the way it is. And we can change it, but it won't change with you living in rage, because it will crush you in the future. It will eventually alienate you from everybody. You won't be able to be around anybody. What are you doing about your transition for your wife and family?
I knew that this was a place that was safe and it was somewhere I could reach out to, and that I could,
This place is here for you. How does a veteran that comes home from war, how does he enter any type of system, whether educational, financial, health system, or whatever? And I'm pretty amazed in 25 years that we've been doing this, and we've been doing it well, and we do it better every day. It's an incredible feeling. It's hard to believe it's been 25 years. We have dealt with a whole array of situations, obstacles for veterans primarily. You've heard it phrased in so many ways from so many of our staff people, and I'm sure if we went back 25 years, it would be pretty much the same song. What's interesting today is it's a lot faster to stay on the cutting edge, and that's one thing that I take pride in. I don't think you stay around if you're not on the cutting edge. And a lot of the things remain the same. We talk about the homeless population and different disorders like PTSD and traumatic brain injury. These things have occurred through all wars. But I think the key thing is, what do we do? What are the solutions to it? What part can we play? Other than being a brain surgeon or a regular therapist one-on-one with veterans and their families all over the country, what can we do? And it's always looking for that little tool, that one piece, that link, just like in our website, that link that can take them to where they need to be to get what they need.